When we heard that you popped your Achilles and then showed up, like within hours, you get a real attaboy for that. That's really unbelievable. So let's give him a round for like stepping up the old North Dakota way.
How do you feel about zero-based budgeting and actually only funding programs that are constitutional?
I think that's a great idea. A lot of people don't understand what zero-based budgeting is. When we came into North Dakota, part of you said, it's a great question. No one's really said, how did you take $1.7 billion out of a $6 billion budget? There was, in government, both at the federal level and the state level, here's how it works. The culture of an agency is, in that agency and their leadership, the folks that sometimes get called the deep state, if they get more money than they did the last time, they're all winners. If they get less money, they're losers. So the whole momentum of that organization, like trying to get to the Super Bowl, win the game, everything about these agencies is we need more money, because they think that they need more money to pay themselves, do whatever, do the whole thing. There was never, it would be crazy if we were getting together, and we're all a group of CEOs and business owners, and we're all together having a little get together, and then you said, okay, who spent the most on sales and marketing? And someone raised their hand. Oh, you're the winner. No, it's not. No, who sold the most? Not who spent the most on sales and marketing. What you sold is an output. What you spent is an input. The whole focus of government is input. We need more inputs. We need more for this program. We need more for that program. I listen to these shows, which I don't really listen to, because there really isn't anything for me to learn. I don't want to sound arrogant, but you could watch these shows, these cable networks around politics and government and policy all day long and not actually learn anything that would help you actually do the job of being a governor and taking costs out of government, because they all are talking about the wrong stuff. Nobody talks about outcomes. Everybody we need this, they're cutting this budget, let's have a thing. Nobody's going to cut this or cut that. We got to agree we can't cut it. And when they say cut, sometimes they're talking about a slightly lower increase. I mean, it's just the words don't even make sense. So it's like, it's one of the challenges is the way my brain sees this stuff is we have to focus on it. So what we did in North Dakota, and we've done it now in every budget cycle since we've been in office, is we don't start with the budget. We start with strategy. We zero base it. We go, what is this agency supposed to do? What is the mission? Okay, if that's not part of the core mission, we get rid of it. You know how happy the employees are? They're like, we don't have to do it. We passed 51 out of 52 red tape reduction bills this year in North Dakota. We're just cutting and cutting and cutting away the stuff that's non-essential, that's not part of the state constitution, that's not the job. If somebody can do it locally, great, and even if you just say we want to spend the same amount of dollars, block grant it to a local community where they can decide, as opposed to having a one-size-fits-all for the whole state, because guess what? Fargo is very different with, as our largest city than Arthur is, the 300 people one. So even in a state like ours, I know one size fits all. So strategy drives budget, not the other way around. And when you do that, magical things happen. And there isn't a business in this country that doesn't have strategy drive their budget. But the government budget always drives strategy. And if the budget isn't big enough, they go, we need more budget. And then everybody's like, oh, I guess they need more budget. No, they don't need more budget. They need to actually have strategy. And at the core of strategy, what we always look for is innovation, not regulation. We get together in the governor's office practically, like put our hands in a circle, and then we, ready break like a team. We go innovation, not regulation. And we fan out, and everywhere we look, where can we solve a problem with a new solution, and where can we get rid of an old regulation? Because regulation is backward looking. And the federal government, when they try to put a regulation on agriculture, energy, when they try to do that in our state, when they do that, by the time they say, oh, there's a problem, we got to fix it. Oh, there's methane leaking from that thief hatch on an, oil tank. So we're going to spend 2 years making the rule, then another 2 years, codifying it, and then 2 years, socializing it, and then they're going to implement it, and then they're going to hire a guy in a pickup, and probably a guy in a pickup, driving around with a clipboard to check on all these different sites. And then meanwhile, Moore's Law has happened, 5 times in 8 years. Moore's Law is where, the power of a chip doubles in power in half the price that you could, before they actually get the guy in the pickup out there, we've got an automatic reporting tool that's digital that requires no people, and it's more accurate, it's timely, it's continuous, as opposed to one person in a pickup driving by every 6 months. And it drives me nuts because part of every regulation is we're going to hire humans, we're going to give them clipboards, we're going to replace the clipboard with the computer, and then they're going to go collect data because we're going to solve this problem. And it's like, if you want that data, then digitize it and, put a chip on that thief hatch and find out what's actually going on and have continuous. And so we have done this over and over and over and over again. Crazy rules on stream monitoring, the Department of Environmental Quality is trying to shove down on our state. And then we came up with a $500 device that's solar powered that we can stick in a stream that'll do the measurement continuously. Okay, for $500, you can barely fill up your tank, for sometimes, for that, to get the guy with a clipboard to go out there to do one measurement a summer, and we're doing it round the clock. So it's like there is so much opportunity. It's not like a little bit of cost out, it's like a complete reinvention of what we're doing. Innovation drives regulation, and it tops regulation, but right now it's the other way around. We crush innovation. The way we beat China in a Cold War is we grow our economy. The way we grow our economy is cut the red tape, innovation. We've always succeeded as a country with innovation. Think the Wright brothers, think Thomas Edison, think of the computer chip, all of the stuff that's happened in our country that's raised the value of everything in our country, the quality of life that we've had, and globally, the biggest gift that we've given to the world is 1 billion people in the last 20 years have been risen out of poverty because of free markets and innovation that came from the United States. We are helping the world without sending them one dime of government funds when we're innovating, because our innovation gets exported. China steals it, but a lot of people pay for it. But that's what thing. But love your question.
What are your plans when elected to reform the Department of Education?
This is one place where I do agree with some of the other fellow candidates, and it seems like an easy one because the Department of Education was only created sort of in recent history. It's not been a long part of the federal government. 4,000 employees, very few, about $68 billion in cost that goes in there. Some of that cost can get cut. The rest of it, block grant it without strings attached back to states. In some equitable fashion. That's how you would do that, and then drive it back, because like in North Dakota, we have 175 school districts in North Dakota, and the responsibilities of those school boards, and a lot of parents have stepped up and run for school board. I mean, one of the great ways to make sure that parents have a voice at the local school is not the federal government passing a rule that's going to work for every one of the hundreds of thousands of public school districts in this country. It's going to be with local control making that happen. And so we've got to get the federal government, it's got to return the power to the states. States got to be smart enough to move it back like we have in North Dakota down to the local school districts. And from the union standpoint, this is a problem. And it's a problem when I talk about ideology being tied into regulation. It's not just school districts. Governor of North Dakota, it's a fantastic job, but you have to work like a dog, because you're not just the governor, you're also chairman of the Industrial Commission, chairman of the Land Board. The Land Board's the largest landowner and largest mineral owner in the state, and you're chairman of the Water Commission. The Water Commission, is in charge of over $1 billion of water projects. And again, North Dakota is the size of all 6 New England states. So think of, we got to be solving the problem for all that. And you're the chairman of the Bank of North Dakota. And the Water Commission, we had a project, and then this goes back to your question, and Biden, in inflation and local control and unions, it's all tied into one thing, is they said, hey, we've got federal money, here's this stuff we're going to give you that's going to really help you build infrastructure. So we get the bid back to finish a water plant for a project that had federal nexus to move water across our state, and the bid went from 35 million to 65 million. I said, that's crazy, because even when we're doing highway stuff, the inflation was only up 30%. Why is it up 100%? And they said, well, because of the new rules. And I said, what new rules? Well, the rules are that you could only buy from union labor in the United States, and you could only buy from American countries. And it's like, sounds great, buy American. Turned out, no American company made the precision pump required to do the water filtration to move water from the Missouri River into the Surrey River Basin. It was a German company, an ally of ours, but if we wanted the federal money, we couldn't use the German company. There were some other parts we needed from Canada. So, so then this project, what are we going to do? Pay 100% inflation and then wait 4 years for this project? Or are we going to serve the state of North Dakota right now? And so then we're pushing back on these kinds of rules and saying, look, we don't want the federal money if it's not saving anything. It's driving inflation, it's driving stuff up, and it's those things are ideological. That's not serving our citizens if nobody in the country in here makes it, but our allies do. So anyway, with the unions, they've got too much power and too much clout with this administration. And of course, he's pandering to them left and right. Doesn't matter, teachers unions, whatever union. And it's a fraction of at a time when we've got 10 million jobs open in America, and you say, we need to protect workers. No, anybody that has got a skill can get a job in any community, in any town, in that skill set, anywhere in the United States. Why would you need to give part of your salary, to a union, a union that is ideologically driven to do that versus actually just saying, wow, as a free person, I can take my skills and get a higher paid job anywhere I want to. Because that's available right now. I mean, if you've got a career in technical education, if you're a plumber, if you're an electrician, if you're a teacher, if you're a nurse, if you're a CDL driver, you can pick the town in America you want to work with, and there's going to be a job available. I don't know what the role unions are playing or who they're saving from, but I'll tell you what happens in places like Chicago, where they get involved and then they drive elections because of the power that they have. They're driving a political agenda. They're not driving a labor agenda.
Our ability to recruit young men and women to serve has fallen off the radar screen. Maybe you could address your view as to how we approach that problem.
We talk a lot about how Reagan won the Cold War. We're in a Cold War with China. There's a certain set of things we have to do diplomatically, information-wise, military-wise, and economic-wise to win a Cold War. But when Reagan did that in the 1980s, we were spending 6.5% of GDP on our military. Today, we're spending 3.5% of our GDP on military. And the Biden administration said, oh, we're giving the military a raise. Well, the raise they were giving was 2 or 3% less than inflation. So we're actually defunding the military when you fund it less than inflation, because the military's got to buy gas. That raised their cost. They got to pay people. They have to do all this other stuff. So we're actually in a bad spot, and then what you described, and then continuing to decline it. Part of it we've got to get, when you get our economy going, we've got to get a higher percent of GDP. We've got to rebuild our military base, both in the private sector as well as in the military, because the way that we deter war, it's so much cheaper. If there's fiscal conservatives in this room that understand how it works the way we understand how it works in North Dakota, if you want to have peace through strength, you have to have strength. And the way you have strength is you actually have real deterrence. And it's the failure of deterrence, as I said earlier, the failure of deterrence is what led Putin to move into Ukraine. And I just feel like we are greenlighting a Taiwan invasion. We're absolutely greenlighting it, because if we say we're going to give you Harpoon missiles that can sink Chinese ships in 2026, if you're advising Xi, what do you say? You don't say don't invade. You say, no, go now. Let's go. 24, 25. We got to get there before the Harpoons get there. When we talk about stuff like that, as opposed to saying they're coming as fast as we can, we're transferring them tomorrow, or better yet, we send them and then we tell them, oh, by the way, we just got 100 Harpoon missiles already in Taiwan. That's a deterrent. But we've got to rebuild. And then in North Dakota, coming out of high school, another education question which I'll ask myself, but you say, why aren't people choosing military? We said in North Dakota, the education system, it's the biggest thing that is a state. The decisions are made locally, but the state is funding almost 80% of that. So we said, hey, if we're going to help fund locally, we ought to have a say. Here's a goal that all of you are held to, an output, choice ready, not career ready, choice ready. So if you're a high school senior in North Dakota, you've got to come out of school and you've got to be able to do at least one of three things. You've got to be able to be choice ready for the military, which means you could pass a military exam, either the physical and the academic test, to be able to do that. You've got to be able to get into one of our colleges, or you've got to be able to get into one of our career and technical education. If you don't want to do any of those three, that's fine, but you've got to be choice ready, because all three of those are excellent choices. If you go to the military and if you go career and technical, guess what? You're not going to have student debt, because any company today that takes you will offer to pay for your school. And this whole idea that we got $1.6 trillion of student debt out there that Biden wants to forgive, which will be the largest, he's trying, and he tried, it failed, he's trying again. These are the largest political payoffs in the nation's history, because they exceed what Biden was doing, not Biden, what Obama was doing with student loans, where they took the caps off of this and they just let it run. I mean, this debt, you can draw a line and see, when did student debt take off? It took off when Biden said, not through a law that Scott Brown would have not voted for, but through orders that they put out that said, we're going to raise the caps for grad school debt unlimited, no cap. Boom, just takes off. You know, oh, we're going to do this. We're going to make it easier to access all this stuff. That's where you run it up. And then, so then what we're going to do, we're going to take kids that went to college, that took out debt, that aren't paying back their debt, because where I grew up, your word is your honor, and if you borrow a dime from someone, you pay that dime back. You don't just like, hey, we're going to, you know, do this. And what do we have? We're going to do that. But then the kid that went to trade school and got a job and is doing that, then he's got no student debt. But the one that went to college and doesn't have a job is not paying taxes. So the guy that the trade school, the blue collar guy who's paying taxes is going to help pay for the debt of the college kid that picked a career. I mean, it is super unjust and it's super political. And I understand what it's like to be in debt. I've been in debt in parts of my life when we were building businesses and we were struggling. I get that, but we've got it. We're not going down that path. And then the Biden administration says we don't have enough money to do the military. Okay, we don't have enough money. How is that possible? They wanted to add 87,000 IRS agents. When I was down at the border 2.5 weeks ago, I said, how many law enforcement do we have on the border around the United States? 19,855 people in law enforcement and the Border Patrol. And they wanted to add over 80,000 new, 4 times the Border Patrol we're going to add to the IRS to go chase all of you, as opposed to fill the positions that are there that we aren't filling. And so if we don't start, if it doesn't start with the top, with the President of the United States respecting the people in the military and understanding that's priority, why would a young man or woman go into the military if they don't feel respected? And as Commander-in-Chief of the North Dakota National Guard, which is the most important and the biggest honor of being a governor of state, we were getting ready to have the memorial service for the 20th of the 9/11, the memorial anniversary. So September 11, 2021. We're getting ready. Biden decides that he wants to withdraw from Afghanistan so he can somehow, I don't know to who, claim political victory by saying we pulled out, we ended the war. I guess was going to be his battle cry, that he ended the war before the 20th anniversary of 9/11. We only had like 2,500 troops left in Afghanistan, and we had, the country was stable. He pulls them out in this disastrous thing. You know who we were going to have that memorial service with? The 29 Gold Star mothers who lost, North Dakota National Guard men and women lost their lives serving in the war on terror, including in Afghanistan. That's who we were meeting with on September 11th. And 2 weeks before, we see the U.S. retreating out of this whole thing, and those mothers came to that ceremony and said, did our son die for no reason? Because this president seems to think that it didn't matter what they did and when their service over there. And this is not like for them, it's not just like, oh, it was a bad foreign policy decision. This is unforgivable. And why would a kid decide to go into the military if they think the commander and the chief doesn't care about the people that are serving?
We have to come together in the middle. What will you do to get us together and get over this partisan mess so that we can start solving our problems and stop fighting?
The reality is the majority of Americans are in the middle and they want solutions. And I think that it's why we're seeing fewer and fewer. And I think even in New Hampshire, the people that are unregistered is now the largest segment. It's larger than either edge. And it'll likely only increase as people keep driving to the edge. So we have anybody that wants to actually govern and get something done has to be able to know how to build solutions. And so everything you just said, we agree with you completely. And happy to talk more afterwards. We've done so many innovative things in North Dakota relative to serving and making sure we can take care of people who are in recovery. And guess what? It's the moral thing to do, that's the right thing to do, because it's a disease, but it's also the fiscally right thing to do. Because when we take a look at the criminal justice system across our country, and you take a look at it in a state like North Dakota, where we spend $500 million in a little state like ours on criminal justice, 100% of the women who are incarcerated have a substance abuse disorder. And you're like, wow, what's the matter with those women? Nearly 100% of them were a victim before they became a criminal. Almost 100% of them survived some kind of childhood trauma, physical abuse, sexual abuse, something that led them to be a user, which then led them into brain disease, which led them to breaking a law, which led them to incarceration. And then if we spend $45,000 a year on incarceration, men, it's about 80% that are in criminal justice system, and I think that's statewide. As a governor, I've appointed more judges than any other governor in history. We had 33 governors in North Dakota, and we've had a shorter history than New Hampshire. But, since statehood in 1889, appointing those judges, when I'm interviewing to appoint these 17 judges I've appointed, we always have a discussion. We've always got 3 to 5 candidates. I ask of all of them, I said, how much of your job as a DA, as a prosecuting attorney, as a defense attorney, as a judge advocate, as a, working in the court system, because that's how you get up to be nominated, is you've spent some time there. And I say, how much of your job is related to the disease of addiction? I've never had an answer below 80%. So take the entire criminal justice system in most states, all of that is going towards the disease of addiction. This is a hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billion-dollar problem. 30 million people in our country, not to mention the 300 that are dying every day, from the disease of addiction. And if we had 300 people that died in an airplane crash tomorrow, we'd all be shocked. Then the next day, 300 died. You'd tell your kids, don't get on a plane. By the third day, we had 300 people that died. Then we'd be like, okay, we're all screaming at our elected officials, do something. And by the next week, no one would be flying and everyone would be demanding, all up to the president, we need a solution. But when that's a statistic, because that's how you get to 110,000 people a year, is 300 a day. And we have lost, since Biden took office, we've lost the equivalent of 4 Vietnams, heading towards 5 Vietnams worth of deaths related to the disease of addiction. And we spend $4 trillion in healthcare in our country, and almost none of it on the preventative side, on the front end, on the services they need to help people steer out of there, or when they get into the criminal justice system, then they come out, they recidivize, they're right back in again. And we've developed amazing diversion programs that help people there. And guess what? They're driven by capitalism. We have people with lived experience. They've been in jail. They've been trapped in a disease. Now they're out. They become a peer support specialist. They get paid. They get reimbursed. And if the people that they're serving, 4 or 5 other clients coming out, if they help them get a job, they help them get a driver's license, they help them get a place to live, those are the social determinants of health that keep them out of going back in the system. If they do that, we pay them even more. And we had a state like ours growing, we couldn't get any addiction counselors to come to our state. And you couldn't definitely come to the West during the oil boom. We now have 800 peer support specialists. Virtually all of them are felons, and they're doing a better job than the traditional medical group at keeping people out of jail, because they've been there, they can relate to them, they can do that, they're saving lives. And a lot of that started with the First Lady right here, so thank you.
The central bank digital currency, and then what's going on with BRICS right now with Brazil, Russia, India, China. Where are you on that future of the US dollar, and what, as president, will you do to protect it?
This is a really important question, and it doesn't come up, and I don't think a lot of people understand it. In my long career, one of the things I was invited to do was to sit on a Federal Reserve Advisory Board back in the 1990s. Had a chance to serve at a time when Alan Greenspan was still involved. Went to National Advisory Board thing, and I said, we're from around the country. I'm a young kid, single, starting a software company, been battling, we've been bootstrapping for 10 years. We're trying to build it. We're saying, we had the venture capitalist said, we'll invest in your company, but only if you move to Silicon Valley. Like, we're building our company here. Good ideas can be anywhere. We've got kids from 220 small towns in North Dakota. We're not moving. And there was no capital. So I went to them, and you go to the bank and say, can we get a loan? And they'd say, no, we can't, because you have no assets. Because everything that you make comes out of the minds of your team members, and it gets expensed. So you pay software developers, it's an expense. But now I have an asset called software that turns out it was worth a lot, but it was zero on the balance sheet. So I'm trying to explain to Alan Greenspan that the accounting systems in the United States are completely wrong. They're not reflecting a culture. They're not reflecting a new level of innovation around the products that we were creating, which were intangible, like software, that had enormous value. But when I would go to the bank, they'd say, show me your balance sheet. And they look at their balance sheet and they're like, you're bankrupt. I'm like, no, we're not bankrupt. We're actually the fastest growing company in the whole state, actually in the whole region. We're actually crushing it. So we had a spot when we were growing, we could not get a loan to buy personal computers to write the code, but the printer that was printing our documentation in Fargo, Night Printing, bought a $4 million 4-color press from Germany, And they got a loan like no problem, because guess what? Their business was going through the roof because our business was going through the roof, but it showed up on their balance sheet. So I'm trying to explain to Alan Greenspan that our vendors can get loans who are prospering because of our enormous, incredible success, and we can't. And do you know what he said to me? In front of a whole group of people, 24 people on advisory thing, and then a room full of advisors, Alan Greenspan said to me, young man, he goes, you sound like a lobsterman trying to get a loan in Kansas City. I think you should move your business to Boston or San Francisco. And talk about hitting my start button. Man, I was like, nope, we are not moving. And now I've heard it. I've heard it from everybody in Silicon Valley. I heard it from there. Now I've heard it from the head of the Federal Reserve. So there have been things broken for a long time in terms of how we think about capital in this country. And the real risk we have right now, you'll be surprised, ties back to economy and energy. Because these transactions where Russia is selling their oil to India and China for the first time ever, up until now, every oil exchange in the world went through the US dollar. If it was going from us to some other country, they would convert their currency into the dollar because oil was priced based on the dollar worldwide. So now if it's unhinged from the dollar, now I can pay in Chinese yuan. That's the beginning of the end of us having a reserve currency. If we don't have a reserve currency where other countries are buying our debt, which we're running up, then the party is over. Officially, ring the bell, it's closing time. The way we've run this country, which is just keep printing money to cover us spending more than we're bringing in, then that's over. Because the only way we keep escaping this thing is because of the strength of the dollar. And guess what? In the Constitution, one of the jobs of the President of the United States, one thing that's prohibited from the states can't come up with their own currency. But when the states got together, they agreed, we're gonna have one currency for this country. That's the federal job. Guess who's not doing that job? The Biden administration. So when I'm president, we'll be focused on what the job is, and that job includes national security, includes the economy, includes understanding that we manage our money correctly, we preserve the value of the dollar, because chewing it up with inflation is one thing, but the fact that we're actually destabilizing it worldwide because of the way we're running energy policy, people will wake up one day and say, what happened? I don't want that to happen. And that's one of the reasons why we're running, because we understand how this changing economy works. We understand how the world works. We understand how government can be shrunk. And we understand how to build teams to get that job done. And we can have this nation safer. We can have a brighter future. And we know we can improve every American life. So thank you guys for coming tonight. Appreciate it.
All right, give it up for the governor. Thank you, Governor. It's been a pleasure and honor. Great job.